The samurai. Their very name drips with blood and steel, whispered in both fear and reverence, wrapped in centuries of myth. They were not merely soldiers, not mercenaries, not men of the sword alone. They were bound by a code so strict that it outlived their empires, outlasted their castles, and still governs hearts today. This code was called Bushido, the way of the warrior. It was not written in books for the common man. It was carved into lives, sealed with blood, passed from master to disciple, like a sacred curse and blessing combined. It was 7 laws, 7 pillars of existence, laws that could make a man unbreakable and destroy him in the same breath. To speak of Bushido is to summon not fantasy, but reality. A reality where honor was worth more than breath, where discipline was sharper than the blade, and where death was not an enemy, but a companion walking always at your side. These are not relics of a vanished Japan. These are laws that still rule today, not only for warriors, but for any man who dares to live with clarity, dignity, and fire in a world that has grown soft and blind. The first law of Bushido was honor, and for the samurai, honor was life itself. Lose your honor, and you had no right to live. This was not the fragile pride of modern men. This was not about insults or slights. Honor was truth, consistency, alignment between word and action, a covenant with oneself. A samurai could endure hunger, exile, even defeat, but he could not endure dishonor. To lie, to betray, to live falsely. This was worse than death. They believed a man without honor was already a ghost, a shadow, moving without substance. That is why they practiced seppuku, ritual suicide, plunging the blade into their own belly when honor was lost. To the modern mind, it seems madness, but to them, it was truth. Better to end with dignity than to live in disgrace. Today, the world mocks honor, replacing it with convenience, replacing it with masks, replacing it with survival at any cost. But Bushido still whispers, if your word means nothing, if your life is a contradiction, then you are already dead, even if your body moves. The second law was loyalty, a loyalty so absolute it terrified enemies and even masters themselves. The samurai swore themselves to their lord, their daimyo, not as servants, but as extensions of his will. Betrayal was unthinkable. To turn against one's master was to erase one's soul. But this loyalty was not slavery. It was chosen. It was fierce. It was an identity. A samurai was not his own. He was part of something larger, a chain that stretched across clans, across centuries. In this loyalty lay both strength and tragedy. It made them unshakable in battle, for no bribe could tempt them. No fear could bend them. Yet it also trapped them, for when corrupt lords rose, the samurai were bound to corruption. Still, the law endured. Loyalty until death. And today, though empires have fallen, the whisper remains. Without loyalty to family, to purpose, to truth itself, you are rootless, and the wind will scatter you like ash. The third law was discipline, and discipline was their daily bread. To be samurai was not simply to wield a sword, it was to master oneself completely. Every morning was ritual, every action deliberate, from how they dressed, to how they bowed, to how they sharpened their blades. The sword was polished as the soul was polished. The body was trained as the mind was trained. They believed that sloppiness in one act meant sloppiness in all acts, and sloppiness in battle meant death. Discipline was the invisible armor stronger than steel. It made them walk with control, fight with control, die with control. A samurai without discipline was no samurai at all. And today, the law still breathes. In a world where men are slaves to appetite, slaves to distraction, slaves to impulse, discipline is still the dividing line between a man who rules himself and a man who is ruled by everything else. The fourth law was respect. But respect was not weakness, nor empty courtesy. It was the acknowledgement of hierarchy, of order, of the sacredness of life itself. A samurai bowed to his master, but he also bowed to his enemy before battle, because respect was not given to advantage, but to the dignity of existence. They respected elders, tradition, rituals, the silence of the tea ceremony, the stillness of gardens. To disrespect was to live without shape, without anchor. Respect ordered their world. It tamed arrogance, tempered violence, reminded them that even as warriors, they were part of a larger tapestry. Today, where arrogance reigns and men shout without listening, Bushido whispers again, respect is not subservience. It is balance. Without it, you are a beast pretending to be a man. The fifth law was honesty, absolute and brutal honesty. A samurai's word was his bond, so much so that written contracts were often unnecessary. To lie was to break the world itself. Honesty meant speaking truth, but also living truth. To say you would act and then fail was to betray Bushido. Even in war, their honesty was terrifying, for they declared their intentions openly, faced their enemies directly, scorned cowardly deceit. This honesty did not make them naive. It made them feared, because a man who refuses to lie cannot be manipulated. Today, honesty is rare currency, and men sell lies cheaply, lying to others, lying to themselves, living in illusions. But Bushido still thunders. The man who cannot face truth has no face at all, only a mask. The sixth law was courage. Not the reckless courage of fools, but the calm courage that steps forward knowing death may come. The samurai lived always with death beside them. They meditated on it, welcomed it, practiced acceptance of it until fear dissolved. To ride into battle was not bravado. It was inevitability. Death was a companion, not an enemy. This made them unshakable, for the man who has already accepted death cannot be threatened. Their courage was the courage to act, to decide, to choose the harder path when the easy one tempts. Today, men fear not death, but life itself. Fear failure, fear risk, fear responsibility. But Bushido reminds us, the man who fears death will never truly live. Courage is the only key. The seventh law was rectitude, justice, righteousness, the unwavering compass of right action. A samurai was not free to act as he pleased. His blade was not his own to use for selfishness or cruelty. Bushido demanded that the sword serve justice, that power be tied to morality. Of course, men are flawed, and many samurai failed this law, becoming brutal or corrupt. But the law itself stood as judgment. Rectitude demanded that you act rightly, even when no one watches, even when it costs you everything. Without it, the sword is nothing but murder. With it, the sword becomes principle. Today, justice is twisted by politics, by selfishness, by greed. But Bushido still whispers, act with righteousness, or you are nothing more than a thief with power. Together, these 7 laws form the cage and the crown of the samurai. Honor, loyalty, discipline, respect, honesty, courage, rectitude. Laws that bound them tighter than chains, but also laws that gave them a power that still echoes. They lived with death always near. But this gave their lives an intensity the modern world cannot fathom. They were feared, yes, but also envied, for they lived with clarity. They knew who they were, what they served, what they would die for. And that clarity is the rarest thing of all. The samurai have long vanished, their castles turned to ruins, their swords displayed in museums, their code diluted into ceremony and legend. Yet Bushido has not died. It lingers in the culture of Japan, in the rituals of martial arts, in the honor codes of warriors worldwide, and most importantly, in the souls of men who refuse to live like beasts. These 7 laws still rule today, because they are not tied to one nation or one era. They are eternal laws of the warrior spirit. Look around, and you will see them. The man who refuses to lie, even when lies are easier, lives Bushido. The man who chooses discipline over indulgence, who shapes his body and mind like steel, lives Bushido. The man who respects others, who honors his word, who stands loyal to his family, his truth, his God, lives Bushido. The man who has already accepted death, who walks into risk and danger without trembling, lives Bushido. The man who acts with justice even when no one sees, who refuses corruption even when bribed, lives Bushido. Bushido is not fantasy. It is not samurai films or romantic stories. It is law. It is pure knowledge. It is the path of those who refuse weakness. And though we no longer live in feudal Japan, every man still faces the same battles. Will you choose honor or disgrace? Loyalty or betrayal? Discipline or chaos? Respect or arrogance? Honesty or deceit? Courage or cowardice? Justice or corruption? These questions define not just samurai, they define you. The world today tells men to chase comfort, to compromise, to bend, to bow. Bushido tells men to live upright, even if it breaks them, to live true, even if it kills them, to live so clearly that death itself bows in respect. That is why the samurai, though gone, still command reverence, because they remind us of the eternal truth. Man was not born to crawl. Man was born to stand, to fight, to live with dignity, even in the shadow of death. Honor, loyalty, discipline, respect, honesty, courage, rectitude. These are not relics. They are mirrors. Look into them, and you will know who you are. Look away, and you will never know. Bushido still rules, whether you acknowledge it or not. The samurai are gone, but the laws remain, waiting for the men brave enough to follow them. And if you dare to live them, you too will walk with death as a companion, with life as a sword, with eternity as your witness. By the way, don't forget to share some love by hitting like and subscribe. Until next time.